Before he died, Carl Jung understood something that most people never realize. Not because it is hidden, but because it is too uncomfortable to face. He realized that the majority of human suffering does not come from the world, from other people, or from fate. It comes from a single illusion we spend our entire lives protecting. And the terrifying part is this: you might be protecting it right now, without even knowing it. Jung spent decades studying the human mind, dreams, fears, desires, trauma, personality, searching for patterns that explain why people feel empty, even when they have everything, why they sabotage happiness, why they repeat painful cycles in relationships, and why so many feel lost despite appearing successful. But near the end of his life, his understanding became painfully simple. He saw that people are not destroyed by darkness. They are destroyed by denying it. From childhood, we learn a silent rule: be good, be accepted, be liked, be normal. So we hide parts of ourselves that don't fit that image. Anger gets buried. Jealousy gets buried. Fear gets buried. Desire gets buried. Even ambition gets buried. We create a version of ourselves that the world approves of, a personality designed for survival, not truth. And over time, we start believing that mask is who we are. But Jung discovered that the parts we reject do not disappear. They wait, they grow, they influence decisions from the shadows. This hidden side of the personality, what he called the shadow, quietly shapes our reactions, relationships, insecurities, and fears. It is why someone who claims they hate attention secretly craves validation. It is why someone who avoids conflict suddenly explodes with anger. It is why people fall for the same toxic partners again and again. The shadow is not evil. It is simply everything we refuse to accept about ourselves. And here is the truth Jung realized near the end. The more you try to appear perfect, the more power your hidden flaws gain over you. Because what is unconscious controls you without permission. People think self-control means suppressing weakness, but Jung saw the opposite. Suppression creates inner division. You become two people, the one you show and the one you hide. That inner conflict drains energy, creates anxiety, and produces a constant feeling that something is missing. Many people describe this feeling as emptiness, restlessness, or not knowing who they truly are. Jung understood that this is not confusion. It is disconnection from the real self. And society unknowingly encourages this disconnection. You are rewarded for fitting in, not for being authentic. You are praised for achievements, not self-understanding. You are taught how to succeed externally, but never how to integrate internally. So people chase goals thinking fulfillment is ahead of them, when the real problem is inside them. Jung observed that even highly successful individuals often feel incomplete because success does not remove inner fragmentation. If anything, it can make it worse, because the mask becomes more valuable and harder to remove. Imagine building an entire life around an identity that isn't fully real. Career choices, relationships, friendships, habits, all shaped by who you think you should be rather than who you actually are. Eventually, the psyche resists. Anxiety appears. Depression appears. Sudden life crises appear. Jung believed these moments were not signs of failure. They were signals from the unconscious demanding integration. In other words, your mind tries to force you back toward your true self. But most people misunderstand these signals. Instead of exploring inward, they escape outward. Distractions, addictions, constant busyness, validation seeking, or blaming others. And this is where Jung's final understanding became almost tragic. He saw that many people reach old age without ever meeting themselves. They live roles, not identities. They perform personalities, not truths. They adapt so well to expectations that they lose connection with their own instincts. And when life slows down, retirement, loss, aging, the emptiness becomes undeniable because the distractions disappear. Jung realized that the greatest tragedy is not suffering. It is living unconsciously. Because unconscious living means your choices are not fully yours. They are reactions shaped by hidden fears and denied desires. But here is where his realization becomes even deeper, because what he discovered next changes everything. He understood that confronting the shadow does not make you darker. It makes you whole. And most people are afraid of that process because they think they will find something terrible inside themselves, when in reality, they often find power they never allowed themselves to use. And this leads to the question that changes everything. What happens when a person finally stops running from themselves? At first, discomfort. Because the moment you begin looking inward honestly, you start noticing contradictions you ignored for years. You realize you are not as patient as you believed, not as selfless, not as confident. You notice jealousy, resentment, fear, insecurity, ego, pride, and the instinctive reaction is rejection. The mind wants to protect the identity you built. It whispers, "This isn't me." But the truth is, it is you, and accepting that does not make you weak. It makes you aware. He understood that awareness is the turning point of psychological transformation. Because what you can see clearly, you can influence. What you deny controls you. Most people spend their lives blaming circumstances for their reactions. They say, "That person made me angry," or "Life made me anxious," without realizing the emotional intensity often comes from unresolved parts within themselves. The external event is just a trigger. The real cause is internal. Once you see that, something powerful happens. You stop feeling like a victim of life. You start recognizing your own participation in your suffering. This realization can feel heavy at first because it removes excuses. But it also gives freedom. If you are part of the problem, you can also become part of the solution. That is the moment a person begins reclaiming power over their own mind. He saw that integration of the shadow does not mean acting on every dark impulse. It means acknowledging it exists, understanding its roots, and consciously choosing how to respond. Anger, for example, often hides unmet needs or violated boundaries. Jealousy can reveal desires you are afraid to admit. Fear can expose areas where growth is needed. Instead of enemies, these emotions become guides. He also realized that many people confuse goodness with harmlessness. They try to be endlessly agreeable, forgiving, accommodating, believing that makes them morally superior. But suppressed aggression does not disappear. It turns passive-aggressive, resentful, or self-destructive. True maturity, he believed, comes when a person accepts their capacity for both kindness and cruelty, strength and vulnerability. Not to justify harmful behavior, but to prevent unconscious expression of it. A person who knows their darkness is less likely to be controlled by it. Another truth he understood was that authenticity naturally creates conflict. The moment you become more honest about who you are, some relationships change. Some people prefer the version of you that was easier to predict, easier to control, easier to fit into their expectations. Growth disrupts dynamics. And many individuals abandon self-discovery because they fear losing approval. But he believed approval is a poor substitute for inner alignment. Living for acceptance creates quiet resentment toward both yourself and others. He observed that people often chase love while disconnected from themselves. They hope relationships will fill internal emptiness. But relationships cannot provide identity. They can only reflect what already exists within you. When someone lacks self-connection, they become dependent on validation. They fear rejection intensely because rejection feels like proof they are incomplete. But when a person integrates more of their true self, they become less desperate for approval. They still value connection, but they are not defined by it. This creates healthier relationships, because attachment is based on choice, not need. Near the end of his life, he also recognized that many crises are actually invitations. Career failures, heartbreak, loss of direction, emotional breakdowns. These moments often force introspection that comfort never would. Pain becomes a doorway to self-awareness. Without disruption, people rarely question their patterns. He saw that suffering, while unpleasant, can accelerate psychological awakening when approached consciously. But there was one realization that stood above all others. He saw that becoming whole is not about reaching perfection. It is about reconciliation. Reconciling the parts of yourself that were divided. Reconciling who you wanted to be with who you actually are. Reconciling strengths and weaknesses into a unified identity. This process creates inner stability. And from that stability comes a quiet confidence that does not depend on external success. And this is where his understanding became almost spiritual in nature. He realized that meaning in life does not come from achievements alone. It comes from becoming yourself. Not the version shaped by fear, expectations, or conditioning, but the deeper self that exists underneath all of that. The tragedy is that many people never allow that self to emerge, because they are too busy maintaining the image they built. But the moment someone begins aligning with their authentic nature, something shifts. Decisions become clearer. Anxiety reduces. Energy increases. There is less internal conflict because there is less pretending. Life does not become perfect, but it becomes real. And reality, even when difficult, is more peaceful than illusion. And this leads to the final truth he understood before death. The realization that changes how you see everything around you. Carl Jung realized that the goal of life is not happiness. It is wholeness. Happiness comes and goes. Success rises and falls. Relationships change. Circumstances shift. But wholeness, the integration of who you truly are, creates a foundation that remains stable even when life becomes uncertain. And most people spend their entire lives chasing temporary emotional highs instead of building that inner foundation. He saw that human beings are naturally pulled toward becoming complete, a process he described as individuation, the unfolding of the authentic self. But society constantly interrupts that process. Expectations, fears, roles, responsibilities. They push people toward conformity instead of self-discovery. So individuals adapt. They become what is required to survive, to belong, to succeed. And over time, they forget that adaptation was never meant to replace identity. The shocking realization was this: many people are not truly living. They are performing. Performing confidence while feeling insecure. Performing happiness while feeling empty. Performing strength while feeling fragile. Performing certainty while feeling lost. And the longer someone performs, the more exhausting life becomes, because maintaining an image requires constant energy. That is why so many people feel tired even when they are not physically overworked. Psychological tension drains more energy than physical effort. He understood that confronting the truth about yourself is painful at first, but liberating afterward. Because when you stop pretending, you stop fearing exposure. When you accept your imperfections, criticism loses power. When you acknowledge your fears, they become manageable instead of overwhelming. Authenticity reduces anxiety because there is less to protect. There is no mask constantly at risk of breaking. Another profound realization he had was about control. People spend enormous effort trying to control external outcomes. Other people's opinions, future events, success timelines. But much of life remains unpredictable. He saw that inner stability matters more than external certainty. A person who knows themselves can adapt to change more easily because their identity does not depend entirely on circumstances. They bend without breaking. He also recognized that darkness is not the enemy of growth. Unconsciousness is. Every human carries contradictions, impulses, flaws, fears. The difference between a destructive person and a mature person is awareness. Awareness creates choice. Without awareness, patterns repeat automatically. With awareness, patterns can evolve. That means transformation is always possible, regardless of age or past mistakes. Near the end, he reportedly reflected on how little people truly know themselves. Not intellectually, but experientially. Self-knowledge is not just thinking about who you are. It is observing your reactions, motivations, dreams, fears, habits. Honestly, it requires courage because illusions feel safer than truth. But illusions also create suffering. Truth creates freedom. And perhaps his most comforting realization was this: you are not meant to eliminate your flaws. You are meant to integrate them. The parts of you that feel broken often contain hidden strengths. Sensitivity can become empathy. Anger can become assertiveness. Fear can become caution. Pain can become wisdom. Nothing within you is entirely useless. Even wounds can become sources of meaning when understood. He saw that a fulfilled life is not one without struggle. It is one with purpose emerging from struggle. When difficulties contribute to self-understanding, they stop feeling meaningless. They become part of a larger story of growth. And that perspective alone can transform how someone experiences hardship. So before he died, the truth he finally understood about everything was simple, yet profound. You are not here to become perfect. You are here to become yourself. Fully, honestly, consciously. And the moment you begin that journey, life stops feeling like something happening to you and starts feeling like something unfolding through you. The question is, will you spend your life protecting who you think you should be, or discovering who you really are? Because the answer to that question determines everything.